UPI, India's flagship payments interface, has garnered worldwide acclaim. GST has truly leveled the playing field in terms of ease of doing business. A small company can just as easily file their tax returns as a conglomerate can. Compliance rates are at a record high. The system overall is much more transparent, efficient, and accessible to taxpayers. It has closed loopholes left open in the era of VAT and indirect taxes. It has reduced corruption by a lot. All of this was accomplished by Dr. Ajay Bhushan Pandey during his time at the helm of India's top administrative organizations, namely UIDAI, GSTN, and Ministry of Finance. Now leading the NFRA as chairperson, Sir has very kindly agreed to share his experiences and words of wisdom with the Bitsian crowd. Please join me in welcoming Sir, who's a visionary, and his expertise and unwavering commitment have paved the way for transformative change in the realms of finance and business. Sir, I would like to start by asking you about your motivation to pursue civil services after your bachelor's degree from IIT Kanpur. And moreover, what made you switch back to higher education? Like, because I saw that you had completed your master's and PhD after becoming an IAS officer.
Yeah, first of all, Arnav, thank you very much for inviting me to this discussion. It is always a pleasure to be associated, be among the youngsters like you, and sharing some of my experiences. The question that you asked is a very, very uh, typical question. And in fact, I was asked the same question way back in 1983, I would say 84, when I went for the UPSC interview, right? I was, like young like you at that time, about 21 years old. And I had not finished my undergrad then. I was in the final semester, and the interview was no, sorry. I had already finished my undergrad, and then I was doing an MTech there. So first year of my MTech. So when I went there in the UPS interview, they asked me the same question, right? And my reply and the same reply I give to you. And that time, from the body language of the my interview board members of the UPSC, it appeared that they were not convinced, because they had become fed up with hearing the similar answers from several others. I mean, the what and I held the view at that time, and the same view I hold now, is that in any country's development, the technology plays a very, very important role. And just imagine that in 1984, still, I mean, there was not many personal computers, and we had only the mainframe computers. Whatever the technology was used in the large scale industry, but it was not as, the widespread, as prevalent, and as democratized as it is today. But then definitely I held the view at that time that the technology is going to play a very, very important role. See, we missed industrial revolution, in the 18th century, right? And why? Because we were not a free country. We were under the British rule. But in this, now the new wave, the entire technology, information technology, this is another kind of the digital revolution that is sweeping across the world. And I was of the view that, if any country has to develop, it will be developed on the base of the technology, right? Now, the question is that, yes, the people from the technology with the IIT degree or the technology degree, they would go and do a technical job, or maybe go for the higher research, and there is nothing wrong in this. I mean, in fact, some people must go there. Otherwise, the other limb of the development will suffer. But we also need some people, who know the technology in the policy making, in the administration, in the actual implementation from the government side, right? And that was the view that I took, I had, and I came into this service. So that was my motivation. Now, your second question, that in 1998, after 14 years in this service, I decided to take a break of 5 years and do my master's and PhD in computer science. It's a very, very technical subject, and that was also very unusual at that time. My own colleagues in IAS, they were asking. They said that, look, the people in the at the mid level, they go and do MBAs. They do something in public administration, or they do higher studies in economics. Why are you going in this hardcore technical area? Maybe you may have forgotten everything about the technology, right? In 14 years is a big time, right? So but then I and that time what I felt was that in 14 years, wherever I worked, I kept using a little bit of technology on a smaller scale. But one area which I felt lacking, that the pace of the technology development was going much faster, and whatever knowledge that I had gained in my IIT was proving to be very, very insufficient. So I thought that, look, if I'm going to use computer, IT, digital, I must know about this. What is this animal, right? What is this computer? What is the operating system? How does it work? How do you program? And so and so. So just out of my that conviction, I thought that okay, let me take a break, and then I went to US and did my masters and also the PhD. And of course, what the people had warned me, that when you go there, you may have forgotten the entire thing that you learned in your BTech in 14 years. 14 years is a big time, right? So I had to spend first semester in just recapturing whatever I had forgotten during of my, for example, basic mathematical concept like the log and other things. I mean, in 14 years you tend to forget the exact formula and those things. But then I was very amazed that it comes back very fast. I mean, whatever you forgot during the last 14 years, actually came back within first 2 months, right? And so that was the motivation for both in 1983 and 84, and then way back in 1998. Yes.
That's amazing, sir. It's really surprising that it all came back in such a short amount of time after a big gap of 14 years. So, sir, your portfolio has been very diverse, like right from the beginning, like with a BTech in electrical to a PhD in computer science. Even in your civil services, you led the Aadhar program and then multiple finance offices in government. So, how did you adapt to the various roles? And I must like stress this that you held the role of CEO of UIDAI, Chairman of GSTN, and Revenue Secretary for the Ministry of Finance simultaneously for a year. That's really amazing.
Yeah. So the good thing, the only common thing about all these three assignments, because all these three assignments, each of them itself is a full-time assignment, right? But then so when the opportunity came, and so usually what happens is that if you are already doing a work, and if somebody asks you to take care of some other work, generally there is some amount of reluctance, saying that, look, I'm overburdened, and why should you do this? I thought, I had a completely different way of thinking. I said that, look, is this not an opportunity to connect the three systems, right? And do something new. Because if you are heading the three organizations, right, then you are in a better position to connect them, and then have a different synergy and achieve something of a completely different scale. And this is exactly what happened. So first, in 2000, I was in Aadhar program from 2010. When the first Aadhar card was issued. So I was in the founding team along with Nandan Nilkani, and then after that, I continued. And I continued from 2010 to 2019. So 9 years. It also happens very rarely that in a government setup, you are allowed to remain there for so much time, right? I mean, that's that way I'm little fortunate that, okay, at least, they allowed me to remain there. And in 2017, when the GST was brought in, then I was asked to head the GST also. So the UID and the GST, I held both the assignment for practically for 3 years, 2017, 18, and 19. And then in 2018, I was given another responsibility of revenue secretary. So what happens now? So I was already in Aadhar. Now, the GST was being rolled out. So we said that, why don't we use that technology platform, which, the Aadhar and then the banking system, the DBT, other things have come in. And why can't we, strengthen the banking system as well as the, your taxation system? And when we started doing about the indirect tax, the question arose that can we do also not do the similar thing for the, the direct tax? And that is where, and then not only the direct tax, and then 2016 was the time when this UPI was launched, right? So being in the finance ministry actually helped me, because the UPI is the combination of the technology as well as the the finance and the banking and other things. Now, if a person who has the knowledge of both the technology, finance, and the banking, and then the taxation, would be in a better position to find the ways to actually find ways to accelerate the adoption of programs like UPI, right? So I exactly know that okay, what needs to be done to promote UPI. I'll give you one example, simple example, that we all use the UPI. You also must be using Google Pay. But supposing, let us say that when you are making a payment to a kirana shop or a vegetable vendor, right, or some street side some person, or your anyone, your household help. Supposing if the system which was prevalent and which is prevalent, like a debit card or the credit card, that the merchant has to pay certain commission to the bank and to the credit card companies. If that was the system, if that system was adopted in the UPI, tell me that your kirana shop would have said कि साहब ऐसा करो कि मुझे cash दे दो, right? Because I
Yes,
don't want to pay 2% or 1%, right? So we understood this, and we said that look, this is a digital payment. When you write a check to somebody, you don't pay that commission, right? And the receiver doesn't have to pay any commission, right? You also don't pay any charges to the bank. But so when the paper transaction, which requires a much more effort, the human intervention is free, it was beyond my comprehension or the reason as to why a digital transaction would require a payment, right? You go to the ATM and withdraw money. So in that physical mode, there is no transaction cost. Currently, I think they have put some transaction cost if you withdraw money from the ATM beyond a certain number of times. But otherwise, it used to be free. But then when you are withdrawing a payment or making a payment through the digital system, why should there be a charge? So we found a ways, so we changed the law. And because, I was in the finance ministry, we could make the law saying that in the UPI, there will be no charges. So similarly, there were many, many more intervention. And that is the reason, we could succeed. Otherwise, only having a technology platform or good technology is not good enough. Similarly, Aadhar, I mean, the lot of many countries, they keep asking us, saying that we want to have a program like Aadhar. What should we do? Can you help us? Can you give us the technology? So my answer is to be that ki Aadhar is not like a the Windows operating system that I can give you a software and then I can load on your server, right? It is the entire ecosystem, right? And it is the entire ecosystem, and which different systems have to be linked. And for that, there has to be a proper policy, the law, the commitment of the government, and then the commitment of all these stakeholders. So entire system has to be developed, right? So that is the and that is and that is where, if someone has the knowledge of law, technology, policy, the finance, the banking, and if they can connect the different the sectors, then one is more likely to succeed than if he wasn't having that perspective.
yes, sir. So I was actually coming to that part only. Like, if we look at the United States model of the social security number, we have the PAN card as like its equivalent in India. So, what really was the need of establishing Aadhaar card in the first place?
See, I'll give you the a little bit of background of Social Security number. The Social Security number was introduced in United States during the time of Great Depression, in 30s. Franklin Roosevelt was the United States president. And so that time, because of the depression, the people had lost, a lot of people had lost their jobs. So in order to provide them certain social welfare benefits, they said that the person should have some identity, right? So they assigned the social security number. But in the social security number that time, or even today, it does not have a biometric deduplication system, right? So technically it is today possible, and that is, if you Google, you'll figure out that, I mean, the social security fraud, people using somebody else's social security number, and those frauds, take place even in a country like US, right? I mean, where, I mean, the laws are, implemented with such rigor. So there also, these problems happen. The first of all, the social security number did not have any biometric deduplication system, right? Right, because was possible for one person to have more than one social security number. Also, it did not have an Aadhaar kind of an authentication infrastructure. What do you mean by authentication infrastructure? For example, let's say you also have an Aadhaar, I also have an Aadhaar. If I know your Aadhaar number, can I use your Aadhaar number and project that I am Arnav Geet Verma? Right. It is
No,
not
sir.
possible.
It's linked with the mobile. Yeah.
It is linked with your mobile and the fingerprint, so the OTP will come on my mobile, not on your mobile. But this kind of a system is not there in case of a social security number, because there is no mobile number which is linked to the or there is no biometric which is linked to the social security number. And then similar was the situation here in the in the US. What happened was, the earlier the social security number was just a number, and because they did not have all these technology, biometrics and other things at that time, and also maybe because of the privacy and other concerns, so they did not go for that kind of a system. So they started using it. Then they made the social security number for use in other programs of the government. Finally, in 60s, in I think 61 or 1961 or 62, almost after 30 years, US government said that social security number will be the default income tax identification number, right? And then, in 73, 74, the US government said that the social security number will be also used in the driver license, and then the several other things. So they took about 40, 50 years. Now in India, when we started this program in 2010, and then, when the Aadhaar, we had enrolled about 100 crore people in 2016. So that time we thought that here is the income tax, the PAN number. But PAN number also had a huge number of fakes. The people didn't exist. They had taken a PAN number. Also the duplicates, because, I could take, two or three PAN numbers and then split my income and do all kinds of things, right? So all those problems were there. So how do you clean up that? So in 2016, we brought in a new law in India, saying that every PAN card, first of all new PAN card will require Aadhaar authentication. And every old PAN card will be required to be linked and authenticated through the Aadhaar in a certain time frame. And of course, by that time, 50 crore PAN numbers had already been issued for the last 60, 70 years. So it is so, and today the situation is that the most of the PAN numbers are either authenticated by the Aadhaar or linked by the Aadhaar number, and then the very minuscule are left. And you must be reading in somewhere in the newspaper that last date is 30th of June now, 30th of June 2023, right? So I mean, till the and if a PAN number is not linked to Aadhaar, then that PAN number is not valid. Those are the provisions of the law. So the question is that you can use the PAN number as a unique identifier, but the question is that you need to have some biometric attached and not only the and the deduplicated, Aadhaar kind of an authentication infrastructure. Secondly, our population today is 137 crores, right? And PAN number is for the income tax payment, right? Or the financial transactions. Now, everybody, India is such a huge country. Everybody, doesn't have that kind of an income that it will come into that slab of the income tax, right? And therefore, everyone may not have the need to have a PAN number, right? So therefore, what was actually needed is something like Aadhaar, because if you are residing in India, if you are a resident of India, and whether you are 1 month old or 1 day old, you were born yesterday, you are entitled to get an Aadhaar number, right? And once you have an Aadhaar, so Aadhaar is your basic identity. The name which chose for this identity, Aadhaar, because Aadhaar is means that foundation. It is the foundation of all your other identities. If you want to drive, you may need to have a driver license. If you want to travel, you may have a passport. And if you want you are income tax payee, then you have this. So you can have a different manifestation of your ID depending upon what exactly you want to use. But something is like it is your it is your core. So basically, all other IDs are like, the situation based ID, right? But after all, you are a, human being, like in a human being also. He's first a human being, then he's a son or daughter or, the school student or college student or an employee and so and so. So we needed a basic ID for, the basic, the human, the resident. And that is exactly it. So we followed that architecture. So today we have an Aadhaar, which is completely based on the biometric, deduplicate and unique, and also authenticable. I have not seen any identity in the world which, you can get an identity, but how do you authenticate yourself online? You have a passport, but today, if you are asked to prove that, please prove this, whether this passport is a genuine passport, how do you prove this, right? There is no way for you to link your passport with the passport office saying that, this is the real passport and this is not a Photoshop passport, right? But in case of an Aadhaar, it is not possible. And mind you, this is not a small country. The country of, 1/6 of the population of the whole world. We have given an ID, which is a unique ID, biometric based identity, minimal chances of having a duplicate, and at the same time, online authenticable, right? And this is exactly, and that is actually is so useful that today you can link it with your PAN card and then remove all bogus and duplicate and fakes from the PAN card database. You can link that with the bank account, eliminate all these fudgy accounts. You can link that with the driver license. You can do this. Direct benefit transfer, the beneficiary database, PDS. Also, you can. So in this way, all ghost, fake and duplicates were eliminated from the various public welfare databases. They are, the ration card, the all welfare schemes. And the result is that during the last 3-4 years, total amount that have been saved is about 276,000 crores. In 2016, a World Bank came out with this study and saying that, Aadhaar can actually, by removing duplicates and fakes, every year it can save 11 billion US dollars. 11 billion US dollars is almost about 90,000 crores. The people at that time didn't, people found it very hard to believe this. But today, there are published results that last 4-5 years, 270,000 crores have been saved. So this is a kind of a real, the story, and then the story of the, the real thing, which has happened on such a large scale.
Yes, sir. So I guess the biometric part and the authentication part really allowed it to be the core identity of the Indian citizen. Now, coming on to your point of scaling up the technology, How did you utilize the emerging technology of like 5, 6 years back to improve the Aadhaar system? And more importantly, the data sharing part between IT, GSC, and customs to facilitate the tax evasion part. Like, how difficult was it to transform the manual and offline paperwork sort of process to a completely online process that you managed to do in your term as chairman of GSTN? What steps assured this wholly remarkable achievement?
You see, once we had come to, in Aadhaar, at a certain level, actually that gave, the entire, gave us a lot of confidence that, if you can have something like Aadhaar, where, you are dealing with the illiterate people, village, the remote, poor connectivity, right? And if you can do this in Aadhaar, then, having something implemented for the GST, uh, uh, just make a comparison. In the GST, total number of companies registered are about 1 crore. In Aadhaar, you are dealing with 130 crores, 35 crores. The GST, they have to file returns. So, and there also, you have to kind of authenticate their identity, remove duplicate, fakes, right? So the basic building blocks were there. If the GST, you needed that the person who is applying is indeed Ajay Bhushan Pandey. Let us say if I am applying for the GST, not somebody else, right? And so therefore my identity could be uh, authenticated through the Aadhaar system. Then my bank account had to be linked, the bank account had to be open. So again, so all those building blocks were there, or the fundamental building blocks. So once you have a fundamental building blocks of, let's say, the Aadhaar system, then you have a bank system, the PAN cards, and all are linked to each other. Then adding another layer, or making another picture, just like, when you are uh, uh, when you are playing a game where, all these different pieces are there, and then you collect them and you create different kinds of objects, right? So similarly here, that, these are the different pieces available here, and using that, you can use that in the GST, improving the GST system, right? So basically, like, if you have done your computer science, you write certain basic functions, right? And you can reuse those functions, and you don't have to rewrite that part, again and again in that system, right? So similarly here, let's say, you have all these systems available, and you bring together all the systems, and then you can transform the GST system. Now, and the same thing we did in the direct tax. I don't know whether, you have yet entered into the era of where, you file your income tax return, but I'm pretty sure that your the yeah, someone in your family may be filing income tax return. Now the income tax return earlier, and you will also realize that, when you go and file your own personal income tax return, you know uh, your employer gives you some kind of a certificate saying that, look, your total salary is so much. Then you have some money in your bank, and then the bank gives you an interest. So the bank gives you an interest certificate. Similarly, if you have invested some money in the stock market or mutual fund, they give you a capital gain statement or dividend statement. Now the earlier system used to be, and that is the system, almost everywhere else in the world, even in the developed countries, that it is the taxpayer which collects all the information from the different sources, and then, you prepare your return, you give it to your accountant, and then he prepares your income tax return. So we said that, in this connected world, why should I collect that information? Why not, the all the information, like, the bank can inform the income tax department saying that, look, I have given so much of interest to this person, and therefore it is his income. Similarly, the all these mutual fund association, they can inform saying that you have so much of transaction of the mutual fund, and this so much is the capital gain. Similarly, your all the employers can also independently inform the tax department saying that this is there. And then the tax department, what they can do is they can create a folder for every taxpayer, and which you can go and see that ki how much income has been reported by the respective agencies, and it is at one place, and this is exactly that has been done. So it's called annual information statement. So any of you have a PAN card, you can enter a PAN card, and then after certain authentication, you log in, and then you can see your entire account in the sense, and you can see that ki how much income has been reported on your part to you by the different people who have made the payment to you. And then based on that, the system itself prepares your draft income tax return. And so the advantage is not only the convenience, of course it is a great convenience, but also earlier, two things used to happen. Maybe I had some bank account, I have forgotten, right, and then I did not include the interest. Or maybe I want to just try that, okay, let me not report this income and just see whether the department, how will the department know. So this way, either the people used to evade taxes knowingly or unknowingly. But now that thing is not possible now, because, and also the person also when he's filing the income tax return, he knows that the department knows about it, right? And therefore I mean, it's better not to take risk, and therefore let me declare everything. So, and that is the reason why during the last 2 3 years, if you have scanned the newspapers recently, you'll see that our tax growth, both GST as well as the income tax during the last 2 3 years after COVID, there it has grown by something like 16 17 18%, and which is far more than the normal GDP growth. Usually the tax collection grows in the same proportion as the GDP growth. Now it has grown up far more than this. So all these things, so therefore your question was that how did we connect. Now the good thing is that, let's say, if the banks are technology enabled, if all the employers also, they are using all the technology for your payroll systems and everything, right? And the similarly, the all the mutual funds, the demat account, all these online transactions. So all these informations were already there. And good thing was that in this entire exercise, the manual to digital conversion did not happen, because the systems which were connected were already digitally enabled. For example, banks got digitized, computerized long time back. Similarly, all these, the online trading, online purchase of mutual fund, all these things had happened. So if all these systems had employee provident fund, that was also computerized. So only thing what was needed was that basic policy framework, the framework of law, which required them to share that data with the income tax department or the GST department. And this is exactly so. So again, I said that somebody who had the knowledge of technology, because let's say if I did not have the knowledge of technology, then I would not have visualized as to how do I take the data from the bank, how do I take data from the all these mutual fund companies. And so in my case, what happened was, because I was generally aware of their systems, so it required few meetings to just to understand that how we can go about it. And once we understood in couple of weeks, then we said that all right, we will give a legal cover to the entire thing, and we'll make changes in the law, and then we'll get that data, right? And then there will be a privacy, data security, and those things. So that was the kind of a background. Yes.
Right, so you mentioned these policies, the legal framework that you provided so that the data could be shared among all the departments. Like, I think it is fair to say that not only for the normal taxpayers, but also for small businesses, this helped them a lot. Like, they could file their taxes as easily as the big businesses, and basically it leveled the playing field among everybody. So, how do you think it impacted India's economy? Not just the tax returns, but the benefit that it provided in terms of compliance, in terms of ease of doing business.
See, if you consider this, earlier this ease of doing business, whenever this term used to be talked about, it meant that, okay, large corporation, they had. But today, you know, uh, if you need some basic somebody to come and clean your house, you go to urban club, right? And then the person comes. How does this happen? Have you ever thought about it? you know Basically what the urban club, or or many of these startups, like the Zomato, or I mean the large, each one of them is capitalizing on this India stack. And basically, all those building blocks are already there. That there is a bank account, and the bank account today, you can have a more trust on the bank account, because the bank account has a PAN number, and PAN number in turn is required to be linked to a Aadhar number. So therefore, a bank account being a bogus bank account is very, very rare, right? And similarly, if the person is asking you to authenticate and all these things, so that, see, the whole system, so the people are today, if you see, complete democratization of the uh, 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 democratization of economy has happened, right? Because earlier the economy meant that only the large business, or the maybe the medium business. Today, a small entrepreneur, right, a carpenter, he's an individual carpenter, he doesn't have to go and register his company, but he can say that, look, I want to work, and then he can get himself onboarded online without seeing the face of anyone. And on a platform like Urban Club, or similar other platform, and then he can offer his services, or he can sell his goods. The ONDC, right, Open Network for the Development of Commerce, is exactly that, right? So what is happening is that, just imagine that, okay, if the payment system was, because any of these platforms also requires a payment system. So that building block is today is there. It requires an identity, it requires a bank account, it requires a, so many of these things are building. So somebody has to just connect and make this platform. And maybe that platform tomorrow could be used for something, making some other bigger platform. So basically, essentially, what has happened is that every person is now digitally empowered, whether he lives in a village, whether he's a poor, whether he's a rich, whoever he is, right? I mean, that is something, and this has happened in a country of 1.4 billion people, right? So imagine. So that is why, at least I hold that view, that today, when we are talking about the economic growth, I mean, these are the something. But then, today, this 1.4 billion people, they are so much digitally empowered. If they are digitally empowered, then they are financially empowered, right?
Yeah.
Financially enabled, right? And digitally enabled. The possibilities are enormous, right? I mean, for them, to do. So when we talk about the ease of doing business, we, in addition to talking about the ease of business of a large corporation, we are also talking of the ease of living and ease of doing business for a vast majority of the common people, the entire gig worker economy today. This is how it is working, right? I mean, this is what it is, the ease of doing business. Yes.
So that is exactly where the topic of our talk, like democratizing the rupee, that's where it came from. The way you have linked Aadhar and GST and taxes and all of that, that's exactly where I thought that we should, like, blanketing all of that. We can say like democratizing economy, empowering everyone. That is where the topic came from. So, moving on to the next question, what were the learnings of your department from the COVID times? Obviously, it was a very hard time, and you rolled out many relief programs. What were the major hurdles? What were the learnings from the COVID times?
See, during the COVID time, actually, uh, I would say that, of course, the COVID was very bad, and it has a very, very unfortunate, consequences for a lot of people, right? It completely crippled the economy. But that was the time when the people needed direct help, right? Just imagine that there is a complete lockdown, right? And your movement was completely, people could not go to the bank account. Even if the money could be sent to a bank, how would people withdraw money, right? If you withdraw money, then how would you go and buy something? So, this COVID actually highlighted the use of India's digital public infrastructure and also the democratized public infrastructure, right? So I remember that, when we wanted to help, right? So we said that, all right, certain amount of rupees will be directly transferred into the bank account of uh, 20 crore women of the family, right? You press a button, the money was transferred. And then that family could actually, buy some essential goods, again, make payment online, and then the so the physical contact could be minimized, right? So that was the time when, the direct assistance could be given, and then the many things could be done without this. See the advantage, and in fact, I came across a very interesting article in the Economist. It was published in 2020 July, August, and again in 2021, two system. And there, in this Economist magazine, they were saying that, look, you know, the US, when it wanted to give assistance to its people, they sent a physical check by snail mail, by the postal mail. And in India, we did it, transfer the money directly, right, electronically. So they were saying that, look, if India can do this, it is scandalous. The word that they used, the economists, this is scandalous that the Americans and the British, they can't do this. I mean, so therefore, as an every Indian, we should be very proud. And this, during the COVID time. And in fact, COVID, that way it helped us. One is that, of course, we had all this digital public infrastructure, we could use it. And to give direct assistance to people. But also, what happened was that it also kind of encouraged people to try more and more digital features of this our public infrastructure during this period, right? For example, the people started using this Google Meet, that kind of there. The people started, meeting people, and then so many of these things have happened, in a very short span of time. People started, making more and more UPIs during that period, right? So all those things happened uh, at a very, very accelerated pace during the COVID times. So the COVID times, one is that India's digital infrastructure, which was just developed, they were put to use, and then they were successful, they were useful. And also, if it was useful then, so its usefulness was proved and demonstrated. And then more and more people, started using it. So this is the kind of a snowball effect. And today, when you see that, the UPI transaction today, in 1 month, 800 crores of transaction, and 14 lakh crore money is being transactions. Almost 75%, almost about 50-60% of the digital payment in terms of volume, in terms of the value, is now through the UPI. And it is also been estimated that during the next 2-3 years, it will become like 75-80%, right? So this is, so the COVID has actually helped. It gave a relief to people, and at the same time, it also helped accelerate the adoption of a use of India's digital public infrastructure.
Yes, sir. Sir, initially when Aadhar was introduced and when it was started, even after introduction, when we were talking about linking it to our bank account, to our PAN number, to our mobile number, there were a lot of privacy concerns which you justly addressed in the Supreme Court. But also, considering you are an expert member in the Justice Sri Krishna Committee, I want to ask you now about the Indian Data Protection Bill. Firstly, why was it withdrawn in 2019? And could you elaborate on what changes have been made so that it can now be passed into a law?
So first of all, particularly so far as Aadhar is concerned, Aadhar law has an inbuilt data protection features. So when we were discussing this data protection, and that time also, we were trying to convince the Supreme Court. And so therefore we took a call saying that, okay, let us not come out with, one omnibus data protection law. You know, let Aadhar should have its own data protection safeguards built into the Aadhar law. Now, in case of a non-Aadhar systems, let us have, data protection law which can be used for, the various other areas. So we amended the Aadhar law. We not amended when we brought in Aadhar law in 2016. That time we had all these features, data protection features, and we could convince the Supreme Court saying that, because that time this question was asked, in India you don't have a data protection law, and therefore, how are you so sure that Aadhar, if you do this, then the people's privacy will be protected? So how are you so sure? So we could demonstrate to the Supreme Court saying that, look, Aadhar Act itself has a lot the data protection safeguards, and therefore let us not worry about it. So far as the other areas are concerned, Justice Sri Krishna Committee, and then we gave a report. The basic fundamental the point in the any data protection law is, like the one is the consent framework, that whenever you are collecting in taking any personal data, then it should be based on the consent, and consent would mean that meaningful consent, not a routine, just some kind of a signature. Then after having collected the data, then there should be a purpose limitation, use limitation. These are the international standards, right? And plus there were certain other points also there in our report, like, to what extent the data will be localized, cross-border data transfers, and so on and so. So we gave our report, but however, it so happened that, whenever you have such wide-ranging, any law which impacts, hundreds of areas, then each of the areas will have their own concern. And then the matter was given to the parliamentary committee. Then it was debated for a while, and then they gave a lot of suggestions. And the problem with the technology area is that, as the time passes, your nature of your problem also will change, right? And therefore, what was there, let's say, 5-6 years back, now all of a sudden you are confronted with, completely new problem. Now, for example, that time there was no chat GPT, right? There is no generative AI, right? And so, all kinds of things, have now, these are the new, the actors have come in now. So now the new data protection law will have to take into that account, right? So I think, so currently, as a nation, the so when the data protection bill was introduced, and when all these concerns started coming up, then it was decided that let's withdraw that bill, and then, take a comprehensive look and the requirements of the present, right? Because that draft was prepared sometime in 2017-18. Now it is almost 4 or 5 years. In the 5 years, there's so much of change in the technology, even about the cross border, the how much data should remain where. So these are a lot of things are in kind of a if efflux, and so therefore these things require a lot of deliberation, and I'm pretty sure that, they will do that, and they will come out soon.
So, sir, like, are we making this law more comprehensive now, or are we diluting it a bit?
I wouldn't be able to answer this question because I'm no more associated with that
Okay.
exercise, right? So my knowledge would be almost same as, your knowledge or anyone else, right? That, what is their current thinking? Yes.
Sir, let's come on to your current role as chairperson of NFRA. Can you give us a brief of what the NFRA does? Because it's a very recent organization formed in 2018 only. How does it aid the government?
Yes. Actually, it doesn't aid the government as much as it aids, uh, the uh, you know uh, it's the the general population, I would say. See, today again, we were mentioning about the people are getting financially enabled, financially included, financially empowered. So if you are financially empowered, then what will you do? You will earn some money, and that money, you are going to put in the capital market. You'll buy mutual fund, you'll buy stocks, and be part of that, the country's development, right? People are not going to put cash or buy gold and keep it there. Like, the people who would like to invest their money into the growth, and one of the ways they invest their money in the growth is that they would like to invest in the capital market. Now the question is that the way, how does this capital market are basically the private corporation, private companies which are listed in the stock market. Now the private companies who are listed, they have to disclose their financial figures to the public, to the shareholders, saying that my total turnover is this, my expenses are this, my total profit is this, profit after tax is this much, the growth of my revenue is this. Now the question is that what is the guarantee that the management of the company is giving the true picture of their financial status? Who is going to verify this? So for that, there is a system, and which again has developed from 1930, 1940 onwards in the US. Uh, this system of your accounts being audited by a statutory auditor. And there is a very interesting case. Again, I'll take you back to 1920, at the time of Great Depression. So there were few companies and which were trying to cheat people by giving a huge amount of dividends and interest. And those companies were not giving their account, saying that, like the Ponzi scheme kind of a thing, right? And then they were collecting people from money from people. So when this entire scam burst, so then they said, okay, there has to be some regulator. So in US in 1932-33, this ACC, Security and Exchange Commission, which is equivalent of SEBI, was established in US. Now thereafter, another scam, big scam took place, and then they said that, look, the auditor has to be appointed by the, not by the management, but by the shareholders. So from those times, uh, this system of statutory auditors came in the world, and that continued for a while. But sometime in 2002, 2003, a very big corporate failure took place. The Enron, which was such a big corporation in US, it just collapsed. Till yesterday, that company was saying that the company is a great company, and then stocks were trading at a very high level. But all of a sudden, the company collapsed, saying that all the turnover and other things, many of these figures were completely bogus. So the question arose that when the company was reporting these bogus figures, what were the statutory auditors doing? So statutory auditors are basically the chartered accountants. And till then, the chartered accountants were regulated by their own professional bodies, like their own association of chartered accountants and so on. So now, because they were being self-regulated by their own associations, so therefore there was a not a real regulation, because supposing the self-regulation only works up to a point, but after that, so then that time in US they brought in a law. It's called a Sarbanes-Oxley Act, and then they brought a system of independent regulator for the statutory auditors, and in US it is called PCAOB. And then on that basis, on the similar pattern, in the UK, this Financial Reporting Council was established. Singapore, Australia, these bodies were there. In India, 2008-9, India, we had also a very big corporate failure of Satyam. Again, all these turnovers and other things also were being reported, fictitious. So again, the question arose that, what were the auditors doing? And then thereafter, several other also scams took place, like the ILFS and several. So in view of that, the Indian Parliament and Indian government also decided that in India also, our statutory auditors should not be regulated by their own association, that is the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, but by an independent regulator. And then this NFRA was set up in 2018. And so essentially, we are the regulator for the statutory auditor. Our job is to ensure that the auditors are doing their professional job. And then because if they do their job properly, their audit quality, then the people will have more trust in the figures and then the reports which are given out by the management. And people will have a more trust in the capital market of the country. So the investors, retail investors, big investors, everyone will feel that yes, India's capital market is backed up by strong regulators, and all the figures which are being there, they are reliable figures, right? And if that happens, then the more and more people will be able to invest the money. Small people, retail and big investors, foreign investors, everyone will do. So therefore, the similarly the banks, for example. Now, supposing if the banks have to decide whether to give loan or not, bank will ask for the balance sheet. Now, what is the guarantee that the balance sheet of that of that company to whom the loan is being given is a correct balance sheet? It is not a fudged balance sheet. So those balance sheets are audited by the statutory auditor. And if they don't do their job, then what will happen? The bank will end up giving loans to undeserving, and then the loans will become NPA. And finally, who will suffer? The ordinary depositors like us.
Yeah.
We deposited our money there. So to that extent, actually, it is for the protection of the investors and the stakeholders of the capital market, and then those who have some stakes in the companies. So that is my role, is to protect the public interest. The public could be the shareholders, the stakeholders such as the banks or the creditors and others.
So, like the a repeat of the 2008 crisis does not happen where the banks are giving loans to undeserving people.
Exactly.
Yes, sir. So we have talked about your vision of integrating Aadhar and GST when you held the three offices together. Now I want to talk to you about the managerial aspect of all things. So when you stepped up from your office in the government of Maharashtra to UIDAI Deputy Director General, what challenges did you face? Like, did the change in the scale of the office from state to national, did it change anything in your approach?
uh, in the nature of the job was different, because even when I was working in the government of Maharashtra setup, one was, of course, the my area was limited, right? And uh, and it was kind of a, I would say, more like a routine job, right? And if you wanted to do any new things, then what happens is that you felt that yes, you needed a support from the bank. If you go and ask bank will say that if they don't have a policy, right? So every time, so amount degree of freedom that you have, was obviously very less, because at
Yeah,
that level you have a not so much of. The good thing about the Aadhar is that it was like a startup.
yeah,
In 2010, I still consider that Aadhar was a startup, GST was a startup. So we used to have Nandan Nilkani, and then some of us, and we didn't have any in terms of physical infrastructure, like the office and other things. They were also very limited, right? Because the whole organization was being built up at that time. So we were like a startup, and therefore being a kind of a startup also helped us, because then we could develop our own system. Because sometimes, if you are working in a established system, then making that change becomes very it becomes like a brownfield project. Whereas in case of Aadhaar type of work, when you go there, It's a completely a new field. And the way you design your system, we what we try to do, because that time there used to be a lot of suggestion that why not improve the PAN card, why not improve the ration card, why not do this. So we said that if we are going to do that, it will be like a patchwork.
Yeah.
If the system itself is leaky, and if you are going to plug one loophole, then it will lead to another loophole. So why not create a completely newly designed system,
Yes.
right? And then use that system to remove anomalies and various distortions and the problems in the other system, right? So that was the so it was quite a different experience. And we were working like in a startup. And in fact, uh, there are and there uh, a lot of people would have felt discomfort working like that scenario, because people who join the government generally they are not mentally attuned to work in a startup kind of a system. Because if
Yeah.
they said that if you have to work in a startup, why join government, right? Right. So but then ethos of our UIDI was quite different. So we, even though we had some people from the government, we had a lot of people from the private sector, a lot of volunteers, a lot of interns. I mean, we had a lot of people there. So we had a mix of people from the government and from the private sector, from the different parts. And then together we could have a very, very startup type of the environment within that organization.
So, what was the difference between the challenges you faced in your time as working for the state government versus working for the central government?
See, the state government, as I said, that the if I had some new idea, right, it was very difficult for me to implement, because it would require some change at the national level,
Hmm.
right? It will require some change at the national level. And then the national level change, you can't do this. So if you can't do this, then you try to do some patchwork within that itself, right? So it was very, very difficult. But when we moved to UIDI, and then the UIDI to the GST, and then the finance ministry, then if you wanted to change something, right? Let's say we wanted that all data from bank and then the stock market or the mutual fund should come to the income tax department, right? I mean, this could be possible when you are working at a national level, right? But then this couldn't have been possible if I wanted to do at the state level, right? So, but then it is very good. But then supposing one has to be very, very careful, because if at a national level, if you're not very careful, and if you do something, then you are going to make a complete mess. You are going to affect the entire country, right? So therefore, while you have a much wider canvas to work with, but you have to also be very careful that you are going to impact the whole country. Whereas a state, if you commit some mistakes or if your judgment goes wrong, not that you are there, but let's say if your judgment goes wrong, then only a small part will be affected. So there's a very, very different challenges. Yes.
That was very insightful, sir. BITS here has a very robust economics department and many elective finance courses that are available for engineering students, including a minor program in finance. According to you, is having an exposure to such fields a big advantage at this age for us?
Yeah, I would also I will recall my IIT days. And that time, every semester we had to take one non-technical subject. This is called the humanities and social science course, HSS they used to call. So some semester I used to take philosophy, sociology, then economics. Those are the different courses I used to take. And usually what happens is that time the people used to feel that these courses are useless, right? And you shouldn't be taking, right? I mean,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
yes, I'll be very frank. But later on I realized that those are the courses which are actually very helpful, and that actually makes you what you are, right? And what you would be, right? So therefore, because during our time, we used to only have one or two economics courses, right? But I'm pretty sure that now those courses would have been redesigned, restructured, right? So my recommendation, if I were to advise the institutes and others, I would say that, look, many of these things, the use of technology, then some finance, and then also one thing which I felt, which helped me a lot, my knowledge of law, right? Because if you know law, then you will be able to maneuver the system,
Yes.
and you will find your ways to the system. Otherwise, having a knowledge, you may have a full knowledge of technology, you may have a full knowledge of your balance sheet, but if you are not able to know the relevant laws, you will not be able to move an inch in this age, right? So you must be aware, and then the question is that law is not a small subject, but what in the college, what they prepare you for, that of course certain basic knowledge of law can be imparted to you, but they could also teach you as to how to gather the knowledge of law, right? I mean, that's very important, rather only telling you the teaching you law, but some amount of law could be taught. But then also, if you want to know about any legal system, right? For example, if you want to know about the banking laws, and if you have to interact with the banks at that policy level, then you must know their constraint. What are the laws they are governed by this? Similarly, the RBI, or similarly, the various other things. So you need not be kind of a expert in the banking laws, but you should be generally be aware, right? Similarly, about the privacy, for example. Let's say many of you will actually go and join some startup, right? But let us say, yeah, as in a startup, of course, you need to have some sound knowledge of corporate finance, right? How
Right.
do you, and then at the same time, you should also be aware that if you going to use public money, then what are the precautions you should take? Because it is a public money. The public money has to be spent in a particular manner,
Right.
right? I mean, even if I am a founder, and then it doesn't mean that I use the money the way I want for my personal use, right? And in case supposing if that happens, then what are the consequences? So many of these things one should be aware. Similarly, if
Right.
you are collecting somebody's data, then even if there is no data protection law, but unless and until you are able to you respect the privacy of people and data, and follow some international accepted standards of data protection, you are going to come into trouble very soon.
Yes.
So any business or anywhere you work, for example, when we were in Aadhar, that time there was no data protection law. So the people, there was one view somewhere, there saying that why are we so much concerned about this privacy? People should be given food. People should be given the basic necessities. The privacy is the luxury of, the rich, and so and so. All those arguments on the other side used to be given. And one side used to say that, the privacy is very important, and then this one. So that debate was taking place. So we could demonstrate to the court, and we didn't go to the court and say that, look, there is no law which binds us to protect privacy, so we'll do whatever we want. We said that no, even if there is no law in Aadhar, we will make a law to protect privacy of people, and that is exactly for that reason. Aadhar was declared constitutional by the Supreme Court, and today it is. Supposing if we were not so much privacy aware, maybe after 1 or 2 years, the people would not have adopted it so much,
Right.
or some other, we would have run into some other kind of a problem, and we had to close down, disband the whole program. In fact, there was a very interesting case. you know Aadhar program was started in 2010 in India. 2007 in UK, they started a similar program. They're the digital identity program in UK, 2006-7, and they collected the biometrics of few million people, and they did not provide for the safeguards which we had in Aadhar. So what happened is ki after 2 3 years of this program, and after having collected biometrics of a couple of million people, this there was so much of outrage in the UK. You can Google and you can find out the entire episode there. And so much was the outrage that the British Parliament had to pass a law to disband this program and destroy the biometrics, and then they disband the identity program, right? So imagine that in UK they started in 2006, and 2009 they had to disband it. And here in 2010 we started, and we knew that today nobody is telling us, right, to follow this. But if you are in the long term business, then you need to have that long term views. So similarly, uh, 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 for those who are in college, these are the some of the things one needs to also develop. So knowledge of a finance law, the data protection, the various regulations. Another thing that has happened during the last 30 40 years, the time when I graduated from IIT, there were not many regulators in the country. For example, SEBI was not there, TRAI was not there, NFRA was not there, Competition Commission of India was not there. So many regulators were not there. So today, and this is not only in India, it is everywhere. So we are now having a more and more kind of a regulated kind of a system, whereas earlier, it used to be, some kind of a very different kind of a government administration architecture, right? Where and here there is an overall change that is taking place. Let law be made, let people themselves apply that, and and there should not be a need for a lot of permissions and other things. Some once in a while, certain time, maybe once in a year or once in a quarter or something, some returns could be filed, and there could be some regulator who will kind of have an oversight. So one also needs to be aware of these developments, that how the governance architecture is changing. Right? So many of these things could be but then again the question is that you have a limited number of years which you can spend in a college, right? So how much because many times I wonder that there will be a demand that in high school you should be teaching this, you should be teaching that, you should be teaching that. So I wouldn't fall into that trap. So my recommendation would be that one should be given a very bird's eye view of many of these things,
Mm.
and then the stress should be to develop the capability that you could learn on your own. And today it's a very different time. This facility was not there. If I needed to understand that that how was the social security number implemented in US in 1983 84, it was not possible, because library, I don't know access to the library, how do you find that relevant material? But now you have to just go to the internet and find, right?
Yes, sir.
And since last 2 3 months the people are using this chat GPT to find, right?
Yeah.
So so that way the many of these things are coming up. So the more stress would be to give you an exposure, right? And then the depending upon your need or from over the time, you should develop the capability to do your own research and find the answers to your problems.
Yes, sir. So foresight and looking into the future ensure the success of your programs, and it can help us to be better engineers, better people ourselves. Right. So looking into the future, what do you think is lacking in the terms of economy, financial literacy, data protection, and how can we as college students, as people who will graduate in the near future, how can we fill those gaps?
See, I would say that you have uh, each one of you have a very great opportunities and role in shaping what kind of a society we will have, right? uh, I am very happy that what has happened during the last 10, 15 years, and which I said in the beginning, that we missed industrial revolution. But nobody can say that we have missed digital revolution. We are quite at the top of it, right?
Right.
And so, your generation, the people, who are coming out of your college, right? You are placed at a unique advantage of using all these, the different components of this digital revolution. This digital public infrastructure which we have in the country, right? And there and entry, the entry barriers are also reducing. 30, 40 years back, was it possible for a few startups from your college to start a company and then become a unicorn? It was impossible, right? Today it is possible, right? So there's immense potential to impact the future of the country and contribute to the growth of the country, because each one of you is privileged to have such a rigorous training or education, and the background, and plus all these infrastructures, are the basic building blocks are there, and more building blocks are also getting built, almost practically every month, right? And then all the infrastructure, suddenly you'll find that people are using GPS to do something. People are using combining GPS and mobile phone and doing something. People are combining the bank account and then the person's need and then doing this. So the many things are happening, right? And each one of them is empowering people, and it is actually leading to the development of our country, right?
Sir, we circulated a form to the audience, and we have one question from that. In times of VAT, a person could not claim full input tax credit if the reseller did not file their returns. The same seems to be in the GST era as well.
Hello. Yeah, I'm
When you
unable.
were there, were there any plans to change this, seeing as
I Can you?
this
Yeah, now can you repeat your question?
fair?
Because you.
Yeah, yeah. So the question we got from the audience was, in the times of VAT, a person could not claim their full input tax credit if the reseller did not file their returns. When you were there with GSTN, were there any plans to alter this, seeing as this may be perceived as unfair on the part of the taxpayer?
No, actually, we made it very deliberate, because we said that, look, if input tax credit can be given only if your seller, because you have bought some goods from the seller, and then you are reselling it, or you are doing some manufacturing, and then you are selling your product. So the input tax credit can be given only if the input tax has been paid, right? And how would the input tax get paid? If the seller files the return. So when we got this in GST, so that time, the similar questions were raised, saying that, look, I have purchased the material. How am I responsible for my seller filing the returns, right? So to that, our answer is to be that, look, when you are dealing with a particular seller, right? You have, so when you are buying something, he is giving you an assurance that the particular item is of a good quality, right? And tomorrow, if, let's say, if that item has a serious defect, or this item has some problem. Are you able to hear me? Because I see a frozen. Yeah. So if the item is defective, then you can go back and go back to that dealer and say that you give me a defective item, then you return my money. So the similar is the situation. So we wanted this system where we said that if the seller has not filed the income tax return, there should be a pressure from the buyers on the seller to file income tax return and make payment, right? So what will happen is that, see, in the earlier system of VAT and the earlier system, if uh, the inspectors used to be sent saying that whether you have filed your return or not. Now there is no need for any inspector to be sent. The buyers of his goods will ensure that the returns are filed, and that is why we adopted this architecture. And this architecture, when we adopted, as I said, that there were a lot of apprehensions like this, but slowly all these apprehensions have gone away. And now, then we came out with a system called electronic invoice. Again, this electronic invoice is a unique in the world. Nowhere in the world, in any other GST system, the invoices are required to be generated on the GST system. And the how it happens is like this. Supposing if I am a seller and I sell something to you, so I will issue an invoice to you, right? Now, so what we said, that every invoice above a certain value, I think 50,000 or 1 lakh rupees, this invoice has to be generated on the main GSTN platform. So you enter the buyer name, seller name, goods name, price, and upload. Immediately, split second, you get an invoice number, unique invoice number. And if you do that, then what happens is all your sales are already reported to the GST, right? And then at the end of the month, you have to only pay the tax. So this electronic invoice actually has solved this problem of input credit mismatch, in the sense that I am trying to claim input tax credit and the seller is trying to file his return. So if this electronic invoice is there, then I should not have any problem in claiming the input tax credit. So this electronic invoice system we introduced in 2020, and initially we knew that uh, crores of invoices are being raised every day, and so in fact, we had recently collected some figures. Every month, every month, about 40 to 50 crore invoices are being generated, right? And then now so earlier the limit was that every company having turnover more than 50 crores, sorry, 500 crores, have to issue all its invoices on through the electronic system. We brought down after a few months to 100 crore, 100 crore to 50 crore. And now from last month, the invoice, that limit has been brought down to 5 crore. So any company having turnover more than 5 crore has to generate invoice on the electronic system. The moment it does it, it's like an email, right? That I generate an invoice, so it will be in my sent box, and the buyer, it will get into their inbox. So if your all the invoices are there in your inbox, you can easily claim the input tax credit, right? So that is the system that has been developed, and that takes care of this problem of people not getting the input tax credit if the seller has not filed his income tax return.
Sir, before we wrap up, we have one final question for you. If you could give one piece of advice to your 20-year-old self, what would it be?
The because I have two children, right? And then they all decided to do something else, not the follow here. But then, surprisingly, even after they also went to the engineering college, and they, uh, but surprisingly, what has happened is that in their job they are doing uh, similar things, right? Even if they, they are doing like once you come to the job, then uh, part of the project. You have to understand the law, you have to understand, connect to the different systems, and then you have to integrate. Many of these things are needed. So therefore my advice would be that uh, because one is that it also depends upon, let's say, supposing somebody wants to go for the pure research, right, or hardcore technical things, and of course, I mean, uh, some people should go into that area, otherwise the entire development wouldn't take place. But those, who wants to use in the application of the technology, right, I would suggest that when you are talking about this, you must become multifaceted, right? I mean, this is something which is a must, in the sense that that will make you because when you go to the outer world, and when you go for applying your knowledge and the technology, you must have the knowledge of the outer world, right? And for that, we discussed exactly that. The based on my experience, I would say that having a knowledge of technology, the law, the policy, finance, I mean, these things are great enabler, and that will help everyone. So my exact advice would be the same.
Thank you, sir. So, with this, we come to the end of our talk. I would like to invite you to say a few words to just conclude the event.
No, I'm very glad that uh, the the BITS has organized this kind of a session. I remember during my days in IIT, we also used to invite some guest uh, uh, and give a talk on different ones. But then, it used to happen in a one classroom and in a physical mode. Today, we are exploiting this, this digital infrastructure, right? And you are making a very good use of this. And I am truly very impressed by that you are organizing such programs, and that itself shows that somewhere there is a thinking that, these are the things which could be there, because uh, uh, and some larger thoughts are being given, right, in the sense that getting into the areas of policy, then basically policy is what the rules of game, right? If you can understand the rules of game, so whether you work in the corporate sector or in the public service or in a anywhere, you will be able to maneuver your path and find your path very easily, right? So I'm very glad that you all have come with this kind of a program, and then this free this kind of a free discussion has been again it is also a pleasure for me to talk to youngsters like this, because in my job, we keep on talking to the people with a lot of experience, right? And then the people with a very, very different age profile.
Right.
But it's good to talk to young people like you.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, it was an absolute privilege and honor to get to interact with you and host you. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to enlighten us. I'm so sorry it ran a bit long. I would also like to thank the audience for joining us. Lastly, we are sharing a feedback form in the chat box, so please, guys, fill that. And the recording for this talk will be shared later. BITS Embryo strives to organize more of these talks, and we hope that we have a similar fantastic response going ahead. Thank you all for your time. Have a wonderful evening ahead. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.